Evelyn Brooks stood on the rain-soaked sidewalk outside 447 Bedford Avenue, her worn brown cardigan pulled tight against the October chill. At 73 years old, her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her late husband's photograph to her chest, not from fear, but from the arthritis that had settled into her bones after 38 years of scrubbing hospital floors as a nurse's aide. Her white hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and despite the water seeping through the worn soles of her shoes, she held her head high. She had lived here for nearly 4 decades, 38 years of making this apartment a home, raising 3 children within these walls, nursing her husband James through cancer in that 3rd-floor bedroom, building a life 1 paycheck at a time, the only place she had left that still held his memory. The street was busy that Tuesday afternoon, filled with young professionals in expensive rain jackets hurrying past scenes they'd rather not see. 2 burly men in work clothes were methodically throwing her belongings onto the wet pavement. Her kitchen table, boxes of photographs, James's favorite reading chair. Evelyn felt exposed, humiliated, but she had every right to be in that apartment. Her rent was paid. This was illegal. Mark Schneider stood in her doorway with his slicked-back hair and predatory smile, checking his designer watch as if bored by the whole affair. "You're 3 weeks behind, lady," he called out loud enough to gather neighbors to hear. "Time's up," he said. Evelyn had no idea that the man in the tailored Italian suit and black leather jacket, standing motionless across the rain-slicked street, had been watching since the first piece of furniture hit the sidewalk. She certainly didn't know that Mark Schneider had just made a fatal mistake, and she couldn't have imagined that what was about to happen would change everything. Hello, family. Welcome to Love and Shattered Bonds Stories. Please hit the subscribe button and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Now let's dive into the story. Evelyn approached the pile of her belongings, trying to salvage what she could from the rain. Her hands shook as she picked up a soaked photo album. James on their wedding day, her babies as toddlers, holidays and birthdays now bleeding watercolor across the pages. Around her, neighbors watched from windows and doorways, their faces showing shame and helplessness. No one could afford to challenge Mark Schneider and risk their own leases. Mark descended the front steps with exaggerated slowness, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "Nothing personal, sweetheart. Just business. Should have paid on time." He picked up one of her couch cushions with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated, and tossed it dismissively onto the pile. "Buildings being renovated anyway. Luxury units. You understand." Evelyn felt her cheeks burn hot despite the cold rain. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, turning this private tragedy into public spectacle. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "I paid. I'm not behind. You know I'm not behind." Mark sighed dramatically, pulling out his phone to show her fabricated records. "According to my files, Mrs. Brooks, you're 3 weeks delinquent. Maybe at your age, memory gets a little foggy." Across the street, Attilio De Santis stood with the perfect stillness of a predator. His neck tattoos were just visible above his collar, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped beneath his scarred cheek. The rain didn't touch him, or perhaps he simply didn't notice. He watched Mark Schneider humiliate this elderly woman on a street Attilio owned, in a building Attilio had purchased 7 years ago through shell companies, on a block where Attilio's word was absolute law. Mark laughed, turning back toward the building entrance, already mentally counting the profit from luxury renovations. He had taken exactly 3 steps when a voice cut through the rain like a straight razor. "You have exactly 5 seconds to put her things back inside." Mark Schneider turned slowly, annoyance flickering across his face. The man crossing the street moved with the kind of confidence that came from never hearing the word no. Each step deliberate, unhurried, absolute. Water splashed beneath expensive Italian leather shoes that probably cost more than Evelyn's monthly rent. "This is private property," Mark said, forcing a smile. "Unless you're interested in leasing. I own this property." Attilio's voice was quiet, which somehow made it more menacing. "I own this building. I own this entire block." Mark's smile faltered. "Look, I don't know who you think you are." 3 black sedans that had been parked along the street suddenly opened. 6 men emerged, their dark suits somehow more threatening than any uniform. They didn't rush or shout. They simply positioned themselves in a loose semicircle, faces hard as the Brooklyn pavement beneath their feet. Mark's complexion went from pink to pale. "Wait, I didn't." Attilio stepped closer, and Evelyn saw Mark actually stumble backward. "You're the property manager. I'm the owner, which makes you my employee." His tattooed hand shot out, gripping Mark's throat, not choking, but holding with absolute control. "And employees who throw elderly women onto the street. Employees who fabricate records and violate rent-controlled agreements." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "They learn very painful lessons about respect." "Please," Mark choked out. "I didn't know. You didn't care." Attilio released him with a small shove. "You have 10 minutes to return every single item to Mrs. Brooks's apartment. Carefully. Then you're going to apologize. Then you're going to pray I don't decide you're more trouble than you're worth." Mark's transformation was instant and complete. He barked orders at his men, who scrambled to collect Evelyn's belongings with sudden reverence. The couch cushions, the photo albums, the kitchen table carried with 2 hands instead of dragged. Evelyn stood frozen, still clutching James's photograph, as this stranger, this clearly dangerous stranger, orchestrated the reversal of her nightmare with nothing but his presence. When her belongings were back inside, Attilio approached her. His voice changed completely, gentleness replacing steel. "Mrs. Brooks, I'm Attilio De Santis. I apologize for what you've endured." He took out a business card from his suit jacket, pressed it into her trembling hand. "You'll never receive another rent increase. If anyone bothers you again, anyone, you call me directly. Capice?" Thank you," Evelyn managed, studying his face. She saw the tattoos creeping up his neck, the scar bisecting his eyebrow, the eyes that had just promised violence. She recognized power and danger when she saw it. "Why?" "Because home is sacred." He glanced at the photograph she held. "And nobody throws widows into the street. Not here. Not ever." As Attilio walked away, his men following like shadows, Evelyn stared at the card in her hand. Relief flooded through her. But so did something else. A deep, unsettling unease about owing her salvation to a man who clearly ruled through fear. 2 weeks passed. Evelyn never called the number on Attilio's card, but the neighborhood couldn't stop talking about him. Whispers traveled through laundromats and corner stores. Mafia connections, protection rackets, people who crossed him and simply disappeared. Mark Schneider was conspicuously absent, his office dark, his phone disconnected. The community tenant meeting was held in the basement of St. Augustine's Church, organized by local activists who'd been fighting displacement for years. 40 residents packed into folding chairs, discussing rent increases and illegal evictions, when the basement door opened. Attilio De Santis walked in wearing an impeccable charcoal suit, his men remaining outside. The room fell silent. "Please continue," he said, taking a seat in the back row. "I'm here to listen." After an awkward pause, the meeting resumed, but every eye kept drifting to the tattooed man sitting calmly with his hands folded. Finally, one of the organizers addressed him directly. "Mr. De Santis, people are saying you own half the buildings on this street." Attilio stood, commanding attention without raising his voice. Not half. All of them. I've owned these properties for a decade through various companies. He looked around the room. My parents came here from Naples with nothing. My mother cleaned houses in neighborhoods where she wasn't welcome. My father laid bricks for buildings he couldn't afford to live in. They faced discrimination, displacement, indignity. His jaw tightened. I swore that would never happen in my territory. Your rents stay controlled. Your apartments get repaired. You're not statistics on some developer's spreadsheet. The room erupted in confused murmurs, some grateful, others terrified. A young mother asked the question everyone was thinking. What do you want in return? Respect for the community. Dignity for people who work hard. That's all. After the meeting dispersed, Evelyn waited, then approached him. I know what you are. Her voice was steady despite her racing heart. Men like you don't do kindness without a price. Attilio didn't flinch. You're right. I'm not a good man by most measures. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. But my price is exactly what I said. Dignity and respect. My mother scrubbed toilets until her hands bled. My father's back was destroyed by manual labor. They deserved better than they got. His eyes held hers. I make sure people like them, people like you, get what they deserve. And if we can't pay your price, then you still keep your home. Before Evelyn could respond, 2 police cruisers pulled up outside, lights flashing. Officers entered, announcing complaints about threatening behavior and illegal intimidation filed by Mark Schneider. Attilio pulled out his phone, made one call. Captain Reynolds? Attilio, you have 2 of your officers at St. Augustine's. Call them off. He listened briefly. Yes, that's appreciated. He hung up. 30 seconds later, the officers received a call. They apologized for the confusion and left. Evelyn stared at him, understanding crystallizing into something cold in her chest. This wasn't just power. This was corruption woven so deep that police captains answered to him instantly. That's the world I live in, Mrs. Brooks, Attilio said quietly. The question is whether you can accept protection from someone who lives in it. Mark Schneider couldn't touch Attilio directly, but he could weaponize the system. Within a week, building inspectors descended on 447 Bedford Avenue, citing violations that hadn't existed for decades. Health department officials found phantom mold. Fire marshals demanded immediate updates that would cost hundreds of thousands. Evelyn watched from her window as Attilio's network went to work. Inspectors who arrived with clipboards left with envelopes. Officials who threatened condemnation suddenly discovered their reports had errors. Problems didn't get fixed. They simply disappeared from official records. The casual corruption disturbed her more than the initial violence had. Then came Inspector Gerald Morrison, a true believer who couldn't be bought. He arrived with genuine concerns about electrical systems and threatened to condemn the entire building within 48 hours. Attilio's men tried reasoning with him. Morrison refused. 3 days later, Evelyn saw Morrison leaving the building department, his right arm in a cast, his face pale, his determination shattered. She found Attilio at his social club that evening, walking past men playing cards who fell silent at her entrance. That inspector, the one with principles. What did you do to him? Attilio didn't insult her with denials. He was going to displace 40 families over violations that could be fixed with time. I made sure he understood the consequences of unreasonable timelines. You broke his arm. My men convinced him to be reasonable. Yes. Evelyn's voice shook with anger. This isn't justice. It's just different violence. You're no better than Mark. Attilio's eyes flashed. The system is already violent, Mrs. Brooks. It just wears a suit and calls itself legal. Mark uses lawyers and bureaucrats to destroy people's lives, and everyone calls it business. I use more honest methods. He stood, intensity radiating from him. That inspector would have put 40 families on the street within a week. I'm protecting you from that violence. By committing more violence? By matching force with force. He stepped closer. You think your legal system will save you? Mark owns judges. He owns politicians. The law is a weapon he wields, and you're standing there with moral principles like they're shields. They're all I have, Evelyn said quietly. If I accept help that requires someone else's suffering, what does that make me? Attilio studied her for a long moment, something like respect flickering across his face. Principled, admirable, and vulnerable. He returned to his seat. Mark won't stop. You're the symbol of everything blocking his profit. Without my protection, I'll fight legally. There are tenant rights organizations, pro bono lawyers, who will take months while Mark works in days. Attilio sighed. But I respect your choice. I'll step back. Completely. I'll have men nearby, watching, not intervening unless. He met her eyes. Unless you're in immediate danger. I won't apologize for that. Evelyn left feeling something between relief and dread. She'd reclaimed her moral high ground. But somewhere deep inside, she wondered if principles would be enough when the next attack came. For 3 weeks, Evelyn fought the legal way. Tenant rights organizations gave her pamphlets. Pro bono lawyers took her case, then got buried under Mark's expensive legal team. Housing court became a masterclass in systemic corruption. Her case dismissed on technicalities, judges who wouldn't meet her eyes, continuances that stretched into infinity. After her third court appearance ended in defeat, Evelyn trudged up the stairs to apartment 4B, exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with her arthritis. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed, for people with money. She made tea, ate crackers for dinner, and fell asleep in James's reading chair still wearing her court clothes. The crash of her door splintering woke her at 2 a.m. 3 men burst in, faces covered with bandanas, moving with practiced efficiency. The largest one grabbed her before she could scream. Mark Schneider sends his regards. Says it's time you understood how things work. They tore through her apartment like a hurricane. Furniture overturned. Dishes shattered. They found her photo albums, the ones she'd salvaged from the rain, and ripped them apart, laughing as they destroyed 40 years of memories. James's face torn in half. Her children's baby pictures scattered like confetti. No, Evelyn lunged at them, surprising everyone, including herself. At 73, something primal took over. She clawed at the man holding James's photo, drew blood across his cheek. He backhanded her. She hit the floor hard, tasting copper. Old bitches fight, he sneered, standing over her. Mark said make it memorable. Said make sure she. The door, already broken, exploded inward. 2 men in dark suits moved with surgical precision. The violence was swift, professional, and devastating. Attilio's watchers weren't there to arrest or deter. They were there to destroy. Within 2 minutes, Mark's thugs were on the floor, subdued, bloody, making sounds that barely qualified as human. Attilio arrived as his men were zip-tying the attackers. He took one look at Evelyn on the floor, at the destroyed photographs, at the blood on her lip, and his fury became something volcanic barely contained beneath ice. Take them to the warehouse, he said quietly. I'll deal with them personally. His men dragged the attackers out. Evelyn knew what that meant. Part of her, the part that had just been violated in her own home, didn't care. Attilio knelt beside her, his voice transformed into something impossibly gentle. I'm sorry. I should have protected you better. He helped her to the couch, his hands careful despite their capacity for violence. I'm so sorry. Evelyn was shaking, shock setting in. Her safe home, her sanctuary, had been turned into a crime scene. All her legal principles, her moral high ground, her belief that the system would work, it lay in pieces around her like the torn photographs. You were right, she whispered. The system is already violent. Attilio's expression held no triumph, only sadness. I wish I'd been wrong. The apartment was in a building 3 blocks over, 4th floor, corner unit, windows that let in morning light. Attilio's men had brought her clothes, toiletries, the photographs that survived. They'd even rescued James's reading chair, now positioned by the window. Evelyn sat in that chair for 2 days, barely speaking, while Attilio's people kept watch outside. Her hands had stopped shaking, but something inside remained fractured. On the 3rd morning, Attilio arrived with coffee and pastries from the Italian bakery on Court Street. He didn't push conversation, just sat across from her, giving her silence when she needed it and presence when she didn't want to be alone. Finally, Evelyn spoke. He won't stop, will he? No. Attilio's honesty was almost comforting in its starkness. You're a symbol now. As long as you're here, you represent resistance to his plans. He'll keep coming. Then what do I do? Attilio set down his coffee cup, meeting her eyes directly. I can give you 2 options. First, I relocate you anywhere in the country. New identity, enough money for comfort, complete safety. You disappear, start fresh somewhere Mark will never find you. Leave Brooklyn. Leave everything I know. She asked. Yes, but you'd be alive and free. He paused. Second option, you stay here in my territory under my full protection, which means accepting my methods, my world, and everything that comes with it. Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper. If I stay, what does that make me? An accomplice to your crimes. Attilio didn't soften it. Perhaps. Or perhaps it makes you a survivor who understands that sometimes the only way to fight monsters is with bigger monsters. He leaned forward. I won't lie to you, Mrs. Brooks. Staying means blood on your hands, even if you never pull a trigger. It means knowing what I do to protect you and accepting it. The room fell silent except for the distant sound of traffic. Evelyn studied this man, this criminal who'd shown her more genuine protection than any legal system. She thought about running, starting over at 73 in some anonymous town. She thought about surrendering her home, her history, her entire life because Mark Schneider wanted profit. I need complete truth, she said finally. Before I decide, I need to know everything. What you do, who you are, what protecting me really costs, not just to you, but to others. She straightened in her chair, summoning the dignity that had never left her despite everything. I won't make this choice blindly. If I'm going to live with blood on my hands, I need to know whose blood it is. Attilio studied her for a long moment, something like admiration crossing his features. Most people don't want to know. They prefer comfortable ignorance. I'm not most people. No, he agreed quietly. You're not. All right, Mrs. Brooks. I'll tell you everything, and then you decide. Attilio poured himself an espresso, the small cup looking fragile in his scarred hands. Then he began. I control organized crime operations across Brooklyn and Queens. Loan sharking, gambling, protection rackets, construction, waste management. If money moves through these neighborhoods, I get a piece. His voice remained steady, clinical. I've ordered beatings, sent people to hospitals, had rivals disappeared when they threatened my territory or my people. I bribe police captains, judges, city council members. I own politicians the way other men own stocks. Evelyn listened, her face unreadable. I'm not a good man by any measure you were raised with, he continued. But I follow codes. No drugs in my territory. I've killed dealers who tried. No prostitution. No harm to civilians who respect the rules. I protect businesses from other predators, ensure neighborhoods stay stable. He met her eyes. My real estate holdings launder money. But unlike other landlords, I maintain buildings. I protect tenants. I keep rents affordable because my profit comes from elsewhere. Why? Evelyn asked. Why not just maximize profit like Mark? My mother, Lucia, cleaned houses in neighborhoods where people spat at her for being Italian. My father, Giuseppe, laid bricks until his spine gave out. They saved every penny to buy a small house in Bensonhurst. His jaw tightened. When I was 15, a developer bought the block, evicted everyone through legal tricks and intimidation. My parents lost everything. My mother died 2 years later. Stress, the doctor said. Broken heart, I knew. He stood, walking to the window. I built this empire on fear and violence. I won't pretend otherwise. But what I do with that power, that's where I try to be different. Family is sacred. Community is sacred. Respect for people who work hard is sacred. Those aren't just words to me. Evelyn absorbed this, seeing the contradiction clearly now. A man who did terrible things to protect beautiful things. A criminal with principles that most legitimate businessmen lacked. The men who attacked me, she said quietly. What happened to them? Attilio's silence stretched long enough to be its own answer. Did they suffer? Yes. Are they alive? Another pause. 2 of them are in hospitals. They'll recover, but they'll never use their hands the same way. His voice dropped. The one who hit you, who tore your photographs, he won't be found. Evelyn should have felt horror, should have felt revulsion. Instead, she felt something complicated and uncomfortable. Satisfaction mixed with shame at that satisfaction. That's the truth, Mrs. Brooks, Attilio said, turning to face her. I'm a monster who tries to protect what's beautiful. I'm a criminal who believes in sacred things. I'll use terrible means to achieve what I think are righteous ends. He spread his hands. Now you know exactly who's offering you protection. Now you can choose. Evelyn set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. I'll stay. I'll accept your protection. But I have a condition. Attilio raised an eyebrow. You're negotiating with me? You said family and community are sacred. Prove it. Her voice gained strength. I won't be passive, some grateful old woman you saved who stays quiet in the corner. I want a voice in how you use your power regarding housing and community. Your protection extends to everyone, not just me. For the first time since she'd met him, Attilio looked genuinely surprised. Then something like respect, maybe even admiration, flickered across his face. You want oversight of my operations? The real estate operations, yes. I want to ensure what you told me is true, that you're different. She leaned forward. You need someone who'll tell you when you're becoming the thing you claim to hate. I'll be that person. Attilio studied her for a long moment, then extended his hand. Deal. But understand, this makes you part of my world officially. There's no going back. I crossed that line when I chose to stay. 3 days later, Attilio offered her a formal position, community liaison for his property holdings. At 73, Evelyn learned to use computers, studied tenant law, memorized city housing codes. She became the voice between Attilio's organization and the community, attending building meetings, handling complaints, ensuring repairs actually happened. When a property manager tried pushing out longtime tenants to flip units for higher rents, Evelyn stopped him with one call to Attilio. The manager was fired within the hour. When Attilio's men wanted to handle a building inspector who was causing problems, Evelyn discovered the inspector had legitimate concerns. She got the violations fixed properly, saved Attilio money, and prevented unnecessary violence. She became his conscience, the reminder of why he owned these properties in the first place. The community's initial fear transformed into cautious trust. Evelyn was their advocate, but unlike other advocates, she had actual power backing her words. When Mrs. Chen's heat went out in January, Evelyn didn't file complaints. She made calls, and repair crews arrived within hours. Then came Rosa Martinez, 23, single mother of 2, working double shifts as a home health aide. Her building manager threatened eviction because she was 2 days late with rent while waiting for her paycheck to clear. Evelyn arrived at the manager's office like an avenging angel in sensible shoes. "You're going to withdraw that eviction notice. You're going to apologize to Ms. Martinez. And you're going to implement a 3-day grace period for all tenants." The manager laughed. "And if I don't?" Evelyn placed a business card on his desk, Attilio's private number. "Then you explain to Mr. De Santis why you're violating his directive that working families get treated with dignity." The manager's face went pale. The eviction notice was withdrawn within the hour. That evening, Evelyn got a call from Attilio. "You fired Tommy Ricci today. He was abusing his authority." A pause. Then, "You're right. He was." "Good call, Mrs. Brooks." Evelyn smiled. She'd found her purpose, wielding power for protection rather than profit. At 73, she'd finally become dangerous. 6 months transformed the neighborhood. Gentrification swept around them like floodwater around high ground. Luxury condos rose on adjacent blocks, artisanal coffee shops replaced bodegas, rents doubled everywhere except Attilio's buildings. His properties became islands of stability in a sea of displacement. Evelyn thrived. She discovered talents she never knew she had: negotiation, advocacy, the ability to navigate between legitimate concerns and organizational power. She and Attilio developed an unlikely friendship built on mutual respect and brutal honesty. They met weekly for dinner at his social club, where she challenged his decisions, and he actually listened. "You're going soft," his captains complained. "I'm going smart," he corrected. "Mrs. Brooks saves me money and violence. That's good business." Then one Tuesday morning, news broke across every channel. Mark Schneider arrested by the FBI. Federal charges: wire fraud, bribery of public officials, conspiracy to commit arson, racketeering. Perp walk footage showed him in handcuffs, his slick back hair disheveled, his predatory confidence shattered. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, recorded conversations, testimony from officials he'd bribed. 20 years minimum in federal prison. Evelyn called Attilio immediately. "You did this. Can you come to the club? We should talk in person." An hour later, they sat in his private office, espresso between them like always. Attilio didn't insult her with denials. "Mark was genuinely guilty of everything they charged him with," he said carefully. "I didn't fabricate evidence or plant anything false. I simply made sure the right people were looking in the right places." He met her eyes. Federal investigators needed a push toward information that was already there. Sometimes justice needs help finding its way. Evelyn processed this. "You used your connections to law enforcement, the same corrupt system you claim to oppose, to bring him down. I used the system's own tools against it, yes." Attilio leaned back. "Mark corrupted judges, bought politicians, weaponized bureaucracy against the powerless. So I pointed federal authorities, people who couldn't be bought, toward his crimes. He destroyed himself. I just made sure someone was watching when he did. That's not pure justice." "No," Attilio agreed. "But it's real justice. Sometimes the only way to fight corruption is from inside the system, using the parts that still work against the parts that don't." Evelyn realized something profound. Justice wasn't always pure. Fighting systemic corruption sometimes required using the system's own mechanisms, even if those mechanisms were themselves tainted. Mark faced 20 years not because the system suddenly worked, but because someone with power had redirected it toward actual enforcement. "The buildings he managed?" she asked. "Being sold. My companies are purchasing them. Tenant protections will remain in place." Attilio's expression softened. "Your neighbors stay in their homes. That's what matters." Evelyn stared at her espresso, seeing her reflection distorted in the dark liquid. She'd made peace with accepting protection from a criminal. Now she was accepting that justice itself could be criminal in its execution while remaining righteous in its outcome. Power, even criminal power, could be redirected toward legitimate good. The question was always who wielded it and why. 1 year after that rainy October day, Evelyn stood in the renovated community room of 447, Bedford Avenue. New floors, fresh paint, computers for tenant use, all funded by Attilio's charitable foundation. 20 residents filled the folding chairs as she taught a workshop on tenant rights, showing them how to fight displacement with knowledge and organization. Her apartment upstairs was secure, her community intact, her purpose renewed in ways she'd never imagined at 73. Attilio arrived at 6, as he did every Tuesday, carrying takeout from the Italian restaurant on Smith Street. Their weekly dinners had become tradition. She reported on community needs, challenged his decisions, reminded him why power existed beyond profit. Tonight, he brought news along with the food. I'm expanding the model to 3 more buildings in Sunset Park. Same protections, same approach. Your approach. Evelyn smiled, arranging plates on her small kitchen table. The same table that had been thrown onto the sidewalk a year ago. Mrs. Chun suggested you look at the properties on 5th Avenue too. The landlord there is pulling the same tactics Mark used. I'll look into it. Attilio poured wine. You've built quite the network, Mrs. Brooks. She had. From a powerless elderly woman facing displacement to an influential advocate with the city's most dangerous man taking her calls. She'd made peace with the contradiction, accepting protection from a criminal while using that protection to help others. The moral calculus wasn't pure, but the results were real. Attilio had found something too, though he'd never say it directly. Moral guidance from someone who saw both his capacity for evil and his potential for good. Someone who challenged him not from fear, but from principle. Their relationship defied every boundary: age, race, class, legality. A 73-year-old black retired nurse's aide and a powerful Italian mafia boss, sharing cannoli and arguing about rent control policies. But they'd given each other what was missing. Evelyn found power and purpose. Attilio found conscience and redemption. As they finished dessert, Evelyn said quietly, "Your parents would be proud, you know." Attilio's espresso cup paused halfway to his lips. Not of the empire, not of the fear or the violence. She met his eyes. But of this, using power to protect the powerless. Ensuring people like them don't lose their homes. That's what would make them proud. Attilio's eyes grew misty. He set down his cup, unable to speak for a moment. For the first time since his parents died, he felt like he was honoring their memory correctly. After he left, Evelyn stood at her window, James's photograph restored to its place on the shelf. Outside, her neighborhood remained, still diverse, still working class, still home. She'd learned hard truths this year. Justice isn't always pure. Protection comes from unlikely sources, and home is worth fighting for by any means necessary. Sometimes the only way to fight monsters is with bigger monsters who remember what it means to be human. She was at peace with that now. So, family, what do you think? Was Evelyn right to accept protection from Attilio? Or should she have kept fighting through the legal system? Could you make the same choice she did? Accepting help from someone dangerous to protect what matters most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective on this complicated story of justice, power, and survival. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with anyone who loves stories that challenge what we think we know about right and wrong. Also, before you go, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what's the weather like over there? I love seeing our global community come together. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.